Hello, what is up, everybody? If you're watching this video, you have probably seen my reaction to the ESPN Esports Power Rankings. Unfortunately, they were quite horrible in many different ways. The rankings were horrible, the blurbs that they wrote were horrible, and the experience all around was just pretty horrible. So instead of doing a power ranking similar to what they did, I've made mine a little different based on one of the suggestions that I received in that video. Somebody asked me if I would be so kind as to rank my top 20 teams. But instead of ranking the top 20 teams, I think it'll be a little bit more interesting to kind of use the LPL as the standard bearer for League of Legends right now. Most people agree that Top Esports is the top team or one of the top teams in the world. So there's no better place than China to look and see how you stack up against the entire league as a whole. So for this ranking, I'm basing it on a proprietary blend of talent and head-to-head matchups. So for the most part, I'm going to judge these teams based on their talent, and I will sort them into a tier, which I will rename later accordingly. However, if there are two teams that are very close, I'm going to take the head-to-head matchup into consideration, which will basically be asking the question, if these two teams played against one another, who would win? And unless there is some kind of gigantic stylistic thing going on that would give me like a ranking that I don't agree with, I will rank according to talent, because talent is really the most important thing in most sports, in my opinion. So we're going to go the reverse order of the LPL standings right now and take a look at where these teams wind up. So before we start doing the tiers, I'm going to order the teams first, and then we'll go from there. So, not supposed to grab that. Send to the back. There we go. First up, 0 and 5, we have Rogue Warriors. Rogue Warriors in the top lane has Crazy and Holder, two Korean imports. In the jungle, they have Haro and Yudong. They're finally playing Haro. Ruby and Wuming in the mid lane. Ruby's been playing more, I believe. Zwuji is their starting bot laner, and they have Lei and Shunyu as their support options. So right now, they're 0 and 5. Rogue Warriors has lost to Invictus Gaming, JDG, Sunning, World Elite, and Top Esports. So Rogue Warriors have had a very difficult roster, or a very difficult schedule so far. So although they're last in the league, I think they are better than some of the teams that we're going to rank them up against. So right now, I'm just going to start off leaving them in the middle. In the middle of the bottom tier, because we are starting from the bottom. Next up, we have Dominus. So Dominus in their last match beat EDG, but EDG did not have Hope. Both literally and figuratively. Their starting AD carry, Hope, was in the hospital and was not allowed to play from the hospital. Shocking. So Dominus has Chalizy and Natural in the top lane. Natural was pretty good last split in spurts, especially when he was like playing Wukong and stuff like that. He actually did make that work a few times. In the jungle, they have Xiaopeng. In the mid lane, they have Twyla. They got rid of Xie, who was the better mid laner, so obviously they're going in the wrong direction there. In the bot lane, they have Shubin and Mitsuki. Those have been the two players that have been playing. They had a Helper at one point, but they made the switch to their academy, basically their developmental league, their bot laner from the developmental league. And so far, they've looked okay. When they beat EDG, Shubin, or Zubin, I don't know how to say the name with any amount of certainty, but he hasn't looked horrible. But if I was going to rank them against Rogue Warriors, I would have to put them below Rogue Warriors. I think that Rogue Warriors has had an incredibly difficult schedule. Dominus lost to E-Star, JDG, LGD, Sunning, and V5. So V5 was, I think, the first match of the season, and that looked worse in the beginning of the split because V5 was not necessarily expected to be a great team. But now with hindsight, we kind of see that V5 is actually pretty good right now. So their schedule was actually pretty tough as well. but losing to E-Star, E-Star is not a great team. I think that Rogue Warriors against E-Star would be a good match. And I just have a preference for Rogue Warriors playstyle. I think that Haro is a better jungler than Xiaopeng, and right now it's very important to have a very good jungler. And Haro had a huge upside that he showed in the last split. Next up, we have LNG. LNG is a very interesting team because they've beaten FPX and RNG. They lost to Bilibili Gaming, lost to E-Star, lost to OMG, lost to Sunning, and lost to Vici Gaming. And for that reason, we're going to have to put them below Rogue Warriors as well. I think Rogue Warriors would be able to take down LNG. Last night, LNG lost to Bilibili Gaming. I was on the Bilibili Gaming side. Not much more to say about that team. Flandre and Chenlong17 in the top lane, they're going back and forth at this point. XX is their jungler. He's not great. Maple's not great. Light has been okay. And then Dwan and Diwandi are the supports, and they've been going back and forth between those two as well. So when these teams start to tinker around with their rosters, that always scares me a lot. Bilibili Gaming. So Bilibili Gaming thus far has been pretty disappointing. And a lot of it has had to do with their jungler Meteor not playing. I'm not sure why he was not playing. There are some rumors that he had a disagreement with the mid laner Fofo, but just based on talent, I think that Bilibili Gaming is actually pretty good. I think that they're not as good as Rogue Warriors, because again, I do think that Haro is a good jungler, so they're probably right around Rogue Warriors. So this is going to be very close. I don't feel like it's a huge deal to separate between these teams right now, because at the end of the day, these are bottom tier teams in China. Like they're not going to go out and qualify for Worlds or anything like that. That'd be pretty cool if they did, but I just don't see that happening. Next up, we have OMG. So OMG has Curse, Hacker, Icon, SMLZ, and Cold. They also have allies in the top lane from V5 from last split as their backup. I think that OMG, they have not had a good start to the split. They beat Dominus and they beat LNG, but they've lost to everyone else. They lost to EDG, RNG, Top Esports, and V5. So they're another team that was one of the early victims of V5, which probably gave people a lower opinion of them than was really justified. Like when we look back at the end of the season, a loss to V5 is probably not going to be some kind of indictment of your ability as a team. But with that being said, I think from a talent perspective and playstyle perspective, they're pretty boring to watch. Hacker has had some points when he's looked good. Icon is actually a pretty decent mid laner, but I don't like their bot lane very much. SMLZ and Cold always seem to underwhelm, and they're like a very low octane, I don't know if that makes any sense, kind of team where they're not necessarily going to go out and get a ton of kills, which is very difficult to see them winning against teams that force the issue. So I think that I like Rogue Warriors and Bilibili Gaming more than OMG for now. But this is another team that I think is pretty far away from the rest of from the real core of the league, which is like the good teams that there are. Next up, we have EDG. So EDG is 2-4 right now. They lost to DMO, which was bad, but they didn't have hope. They lost to Invictus Gaming, which is reasonable. They beat OMG. They beat Sunning, which is, I think, a good win. They lost to World Elite, and they lost to Top Esports. So they've had a pretty tough schedule so far. I think that they're definitely better than all these teams that we have below them. So I'm going to throw them into Tier 4 for now. Audi, Jai, and Junjia. They have Audi and Xiao Shang in the top lane, but Audi's the only one who's played so far. Jai and Junjia in the... is it Jai or GG? I think I always get that name wrong, but I can't help myself. They're both in the jungle, so a lot of J names for the jungle. Scout is the mid laner. Hope is the starting bot laner with BBD as his backup, and then Mako is the support. When I was looking up this team, I was pretty surprised at how young a lot of the players are. Because I do recognize a lot of these names for several years now. Going back to when they had Clear Love as their jungler, now he's their coach. But EDG, I think, has pretty high upside. They the one thing that I love about China is that they have a lot of these young players that have experience already, because China was out aggressively buying the younger players from Korea and really fostering a development, a pipeline of good players through their solo queue scene. Like, they have the Ionia server, which you have to be like very good to even be allowed to join. Very interesting. A ton of good players in China, and a lot of that has to do with their solo queue environment, I would think, because it's creating these players that are just much better. Just like, imagine living in a town where there are 200 people who play pickup basketball every single day, continuously competing against one another. Obviously, you're going to have some players emerge from there that are very strong. Next up, we have E-Star. E-Star is much worse than they were in the last split. I think part of it was just overperforming, and they have also lost Cryan. I'm not a huge fan of Cryan compared to Xiaohu. I think Xiaohu's a better player, but RNG's making some weird roster decisions right now. So on E-Star, we have Xiaobai, Wei, FunFun, Wink, and Xiaoxi. So they lost to Bilibili Gaming, they lost to FPX, lost to LGD, and RNG. So they've had a pretty difficult schedule. They beat Dominus and they beat LNG. So I can't really give them too much credit for those victories. So for that reason, I'm throwing them in the bottom tier. I don't think they're a serious contender for playoffs or anything like that at this point in the season. The meta would have to shift towards them somehow, and I really can't see a meta that they're going to be significantly better than the teams that are above them. Next up, Vici Gaming. So Vici Gaming is another team that is making some changes with their roster, and it's actually looking pretty good recently. They didn't have a tough matchup in their last match against LNG, but they did have some good picks. So I like the fact that Leon played Graves, Volibear, and Nidalee. More the Graves and Nidalee than the Volibear. I think Volibear won't last very long in the meta because he'll probably get nerfed at some point. And the only reason he's even an option right now is because his kit is kind of messed up fundamentally. But I think Vici Gaming, going into the season, I was not high on them, but I did think they were going to be better than they are right now. I do have a lot of respect for Koma, obviously, one of the best coaches in the world. But let's see, I had Vici Gaming as one of the 8 worst teams in the league, and I'm pretty sure that's where I'm leaving them right now by throwing them in tier 5. So before we move on, let's just talk about the roster stuff that's going on right now. So Cube is their top laner. He's not going anywhere. They started the season with Aix as their jungler. Now they're using Leon. So Leon was on Invictus Gaming. Kind of underperformed on Invictus Gaming altogether. He was kind of assumed to be an upgrade over Ning, but I think Ning is proving right now that he's still a better jungler than Leon. In the mid lane, they started the season with Forge. Now they're moving to Zika. Zika is a slightly younger player from Korea. I think he was someone that was kind of handpicked by Koma to come to the LPL and play on Vici Gaming. So just for the reason that Koma selected him, you have to think that there is some upside there. In the bot lane, we have iBoy and Hong and Maestro. So iBoy has been talked up for a long time, but he hasn't really shown the ability to carry recently. And if he does carry, then I'm going to say, oh, well, you know, his team put him in a position to succeed. So it's going to be tough to really have my opinion changed on iBoy in the short term. And for that reason, we're going to throw Vici Gaming in the bottom tier. We can differentiate between these teams later, but it's just not worth it right now. Let's keep moving. Next up, we have JDG in the standings. But JDG, it's funny because I've been pretty anti JDG ever since like everyone fell in love with them. I knew that the biggest reason why they were very successful was because of the meta that was developing and the patches that they were playing on. So let's just take a look at their roster. Zoom, Kanavi, Yagao, Loken, Lumao. These are 5 good players. They obviously have the ability to win a championship because they've won a championship. And I expect them to be very competitive for the rest of the split. They beat Dominus. They lost to RNG. They lost to Top Esports. but they're 3-2 overall. They don't have any very impressive wins so far. One, two. They beat Sunning, Rogue Warriors, and Dominus. So we have to see them against some of the top competition that's out there. But even without seeing that, I'm comfortable putting them ahead of EDG in a tier above EDG. That might change. That might change in the next month or so if JDG can't survive on this patch or the upcoming patches. But I kind of have to give them the benefit of the doubt at this point because of the fact that they won the last split. I think that's fair. Next up, we have Sunning. Sunning is a team that I'm relatively high on compared to the other teams that are in the league because I like their playstyle. I like their players. I think Bin in the top lane has been pretty good so far this split. I think S of M has been very impressive, especially when he was playing things like Graves. He's kind of moving away from that now, which is concerning. But we'll see how that goes because they might be anticipating the tank meta that's coming. Some people think that a tank meta is coming, which will also kind of play into the fact that it's more of an AD centric meta. So the way that it works is if as AD carries become more and more powerful and secure, because teams are building around them, you have to have more tanks to help in the team fights, setting up this structured team fight environment, and that's going to play into the hands of Sunning. So even though I liked them on the jungle carry patch, I think that as we move towards a AD carry meta where Sword Art and Huan Feng will be the focus of the team, that's going to be very good for them. So for that reason, I think they are slightly better than EDG, but I don't know if I can really put them up with JDG yet. That's what their aspirations are, is to be like a top 4, top 5 team. So let's go to... well, I should mention Angel. I'm not a huge fan of Angel. I don't think he's very good. And I forgot to say during JDG, Yagao and Loken are the weak points of that team. They kind of scare me. I'm not in love with either of those players. So we'll see how that goes. Like, Loken can carry when he's given the entire game to succeed, but I don't know how sustainable that is when we get into a more difficult meta. For the AD carries, or for when AD carries really have to shoulder more of the burden for their team. Next up, we have RNG. RNG is currently 4-3. They have New in the top lane, Xiaolong Bao in the jungle, Xiaohu and Cryin in the mid lane, Betty as their starting bot laner, and Ming is their support. So I like RNG a lot. I think that with Xiaohu, they are a much better team than Cryin, but they've been playing Cryin for the past couple of matches, which is very concerning. That just seems like a horrible idea to change that up during this split as they're potentially looking towards Worlds. So they must think that Cryin is better than Xiaohu. I haven't seen anything to suggest that Cryin is better than Xiaohu on stage. So maybe there's something going on in the scrims that is forcing them to make this decision. Maybe it's an upper management decision. Maybe Xiaohu is not gelling with the team in like a personality way. But he's really he's really the core or the last remaining piece from the Uzi teams. I think Ming also was on some of those teams, but Xiaohu is really, like, at one point was considered a future best mid laner in the world, and to think that RNG is moving away from him is kind of insane. If they are going to move away from him, I hope that he gets traded to another team and just dominates RNG in the playoffs. That would be the absolute best case scenario. I do like Xiaohu a lot. I think that he has great upside, but right now, because of all the roster stuff that's going on, I'm going to throw them below Sunning and below EDG. I think they're moving in the wrong direction in general. Today they lost to World Elite, I believe. So next up, we have Invictus Gaming. So Invictus Gaming has quietly put together a pretty good season so far. They beat EDG, beat FPX, lost to LGD, beat Rogue Warriors, beat Sunning, lost to World Elite. So losing to World Elite and LGD, obviously that's not ideal. We don't want them to lose ever, but they're still incorrectly valued by the public. So Invictus Gaming is a team that I just have to like. Right now, I think that they are better than JDG. But it's going to be interesting to see. Okay, I don't think they're better than JDG. Invictus Gaming and JDG are inseparable right now in my mind because Invictus Gaming and JDG both have issues with their rosters. I think that Puff and Southwind for Invictus Gaming they're not good. They're easily the weakest link of the team, and I'm very skeptical that they'll be able to achieve long-term success with those players. It's just like they get caught out in weird situations. I've heard there are rumors that Southwind and the Shy don't get along, which is kind of weird. And if you have to pick between the Shy and anyone else, basically, you have to get rid of the other person and appease the Shy, because the Shy is a much better player and a much bigger difference maker. And I couldn't see them letting like that kind of rift destroy their team when they have the Shy and Rookie. Like I doubt that Rookie's going to be okay with the Shy going to a different team. So Invictus Gaming, I have them right around JDG. We will be moving these teams around further, but this is just where we are for right now. Next up, we have FunPlus Phoenix. FunPlus Phoenix, the world champions from last year. People are sleeping on FPX. Right now, FPX is ranked like 10th in the ESPN Power Rankings. That's how you know that ESPN Esports is a complete sham and doesn't know what they're doing. Khan, being their top laner now, has added another wrinkle to their team, and they're really clicking at this point. So they beat BLG, they beat eStar. That doesn't matter. They lost to Invictus Gaming. Invictus Gaming is a good team. So the public perception of Invictus Gaming being lower than it should be makes it feel like a worse loss than it really was. Invictus Gaming is a top 4 team in China. So when 2 top 4 teams go against each other, either team can win. And you shouldn't unfairly downgrade a team just because they played against a good team. Next up, we have LNG. They lost to LNG in their first match of the split, which was pretty insane. But that's not indicative of like some kind of internal problems at FPX. That was just a fluke, in my opinion. FPX has beaten World Elite, which is looking like a better victory as time goes on because World Elite is playing well still. And they beat V5, which again is looking better as time goes on because now it looks like V5 is a legitimate team for at least for playoff contention. So for that reason, I'm very comfortable putting FPX in the top tier of teams in China right now. Next up, we have LGD. LGD is another team that I'm a huge fan of. Last season, I had a ton of LGD lineups all the time because I loved Peanut. But they really didn't have very good solo laners, which was really holding them back. And I think we see so far in this split that the upgrades that they've made have been very helpful. So they beat Dominus, not surprising. Beat eStar, not surprising. They beat Invictus Gaming, which was a very good win, in my opinion, because I like Invictus Gaming. They lost to Top Esports, which is fine because a lot of teams lose to Top Esports. And they beat V5. So again, the V5 victory is looking better as time goes on. The Invictus Gaming victory is looking better as time goes on. And the Top Esports loss, you can't really kill them for that. So I have to have them below Invictus Gaming because when they went head-to-head, Invictus Gaming was able to take that victory. And they're behind JDG because I think that we cannot be certain that an AD carry meta would benefit LGD. I think that if Senna is one of the most powerful AD carries, then LGD will be fine as long as it's not banned away from them every single match. But Kramer is not an AD carry that I trust. So I think that the problems that Invictus Gaming, JDG, and LGD have are all relatively similar in the fact that they don't have an AD carry that they can trust. V5 is up next. V5 is a very fun team to watch and to make Esports Center for because they have hilarious names. But they're much more than their hilarious names at this point. They beat BLG without Meteor, so I don't really put much weight into that. They beat Dominus. I don't put any weight into that. They lost to FPX. They should lose to FPX. I don't put any weight into that. They lost to LGD. Now it's getting questionable. So a lot of teams or a lot of people, I think, were half joking, but saying things like V5 can make worlds, and they certainly can make worlds just by having a good summer performance. But I think that the hype surrounding them is a little overblown right now. They lost to LGD. They beat OMG, not a great victory. They beat RNG, which was pretty surprising. I was on the RNG side in that one. And they beat Vici Gaming. So Vici Gaming is a tier 5 team. I'm not going to give them any bonus points for that. BLG, bottom tier. DMO, bottom tier. Lost to FPX, top tier. And then they lost to LGD. So I think for right now, V5 is interesting when comparing them to LGD, JDG, and Invictus Gaming, because their bot lane is actually the thing that you can feel the best about right now. You can feel the best about the Big Dick bot lane, obviously. So Sam D and the PP God have done very well so far. Bubu and Weiwei, I can't trust those two. I don't think that they're very good players. There's a reason why they were given up by Sunning. Bin and SFM are better players than Bubu and Weiwei, in my opinion. I think when V5 and Sunning play each other, I think that Sunning will come out on top. They will come out on top over the Big Dick bot lane. That's I'm sure there are some jokes in that one. And then Mole's an okay mid laner. I thought that he was pretty good last split, even though his team was getting destroyed all the time. He showed a very versatile champion pool, and yeah, I think Mole is a pretty decent player overall. He's not a difference maker like a league winner, but he's been pretty good. Last up, we have second to last, we have Team World Elite. We have Morgan, Beishang, Teacherma, Zhaomeng, and Missing. So this roster is very interesting because they're not necessarily the most talented players in the league. Morgan is a very good top laner, a carry top laner, but he hasn't really been put into a position where he needs to carry many games because of how they play. So Beishang and Teacherma are generally the ones creating a lead in the early game, similar to how Niski and Blabber create a lead in the early game, and then they take that and transition it to the side lanes, normally bot lane. So Zhaomeng has looked great because he's given a lot of resources and a lot of tools to succeed. I wouldn't read too much into that. I don't think that he's a world-class AD carry yet, but he's a pretty young player and he has good upside. Team World Elite has lost to FPX and they lost to Sunning. But again, I have a high opinion of Sunning. So right now for the rankings, I feel comfortable putting World Elite above LGD and World Elite, above V5 and LGD. But it's tough to put them above JDG or Invictus Gaming yet, because we haven't seen them face off against either of those teams. Or no, World Elite beat Invictus Gaming, so maybe I have to put World Elite a little higher. I think that World Elite, if we have the Shy against Morgan, that's pretty volatile. Ning against Beishang, that's pretty volatile. In the mid lane, we have Teacherma against Rookie. I think that's a big advantage to Rookie. And then in the bot lane, we have Puff and Southwind against Zhaomeng and Missing. I think the difference there is favored towards World Elite, but it's lower than public perception would probably be. There may be some bias in here on my end, but I can't really discern that for myself. So I kind of just want to leave it as is right now. It would be easier to make the argument for World Elite over JDG, I think. But probably not. Tough to say. I'm going to move on. So last but not least, Top Esports, best team in China right now. I think that Top Esports and FPX are the two best teams in China, and it'll be tough to change my mind on that in the short term. In order for one of these other teams to kind of come up to their level, it's going to require either sustained success from JDG, victories over FPX or Top Esports by one of the teams in Tier 3. Actually, no. Even if one of the teams in Tier 3 beat Top Esports or FPX in the regular season, or even the playoffs, I would still prefer Top Esports or FPX in a head-to-head matchup at Worlds. I just think the talent is better on that side of things. So that might come to bite me at some point, but we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. So so basically, this is how I wanted to set things up at first. And now we're going to go to the LCK and bring in some LCK teams and see where they would end up in this league. So tier 5 for now is going to be the you're lucky you are from China, because if you weren't, you would not be in the LPL. If this was like a merit-based league like the Ionia server, none of these teams would be in the top division in China. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Wait, am I missing a team? Top Esports, FPX, V5, LGD, FPX, IG, RNG, Sunning, JDG, Vici, E-Star, EDG, OMG, Billy Gaming, LNG. Wait, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3. Okay, never mind. That's 17. We're fine. Crisis averted. So let's go to Korea. We're going to start at the bottom again. So first up, we have Griffin. I should not be doing it like that. First up, we have Griffin. So Griffin has Sword. Wait, this isn't right. Wrong roster. Griffin's gone. What am I even saying? I was trying to wrap my mind around that real quick. So first up, we have Sandbox. I'm not even going to waste my time dragging their icon onto the screen. Sandbox Gaming, no, you're not allowed to play with us in China. Next up, Hanwha Life. I think their bot lane is interesting. I like Viper and Lehens. I think Dudu and Cad have actually been pretty okay considering their expectations, but they're not good enough either. Hanwha Life, sorry, but you can't play with us. Seolhaewon Prince, Ixu, Flawless, Mickey, Hybrid, Secret. I do love Mickey. He's a cool guy, and I think that Seolhaewon Prince could compete theoretically with some of these teams from the "you're lucky you're from China" tier, but they're not good enough to play in any meaningful matches in China. KT Rolster. Now we're getting to an interesting spot in the standings where they may actually have a chance to compete. KT Rolster has Smeb, Bono, Kuro, Yukal, Aiming, and Tucson. So Yukal is actually a pretty good mid laner, but I still do prefer Kuro for the time being. I think Smeb is a good player. He has had some good performances and some bad performances recently. Like he basically lost his team a match, but then he won his team a match. So it's kind of half and half right now. Unfortunately, if we put KT Rolster up against RNG, I think RNG takes them out pretty easily. I think New against Smeb, probably Smeb favored, but relatively close. Xiaolong Bao against Bono, I think Xiaolong Bao is better. In the mid lane, I think Xiaohu and Cryan are both better than Kuro. In the bot lane, Betty versus Aiming, that's probably very close. That's probably 50-50. And Ming and Tucson, I can't really differentiate between the two very much. So KT Rolster, nope, sorry, you can't play with us. Next up, Afrika Freaks. So again, let's compare them to RNG. We have New against Keen. Keen is probably a better player. Spirit against Xiaolong Bao. I prefer Xiaolong Bao. In the mid lane, we have All In and Fly. I think All In has been the one playing, right? Fly has been playing. So it doesn't really matter. I think Xiaohu and Cryan are better than All In. In the bot lane, they have Mystic and Jelly, but I don't see a big differentiation between those roles as well. So I think that the advantage should go to RNG. Afrika Freaks, an interesting team. Maybe they'd be able to play in China next year, but for now, you're not allowed to play with us. In fourth place, tied for fourth place in Korea right now, we have T1. And T1 is obviously one of the best teams in the world. So we have Kana, Cuz Elim, Faker, Teddy, and Effort. Compared to RNG, I prefer Kana. I think Cuz and Elim are right around Xiaolong Bao on his good days. But I think their consistency is probably a little bit better, and that may just come down to the fact that they play for T1 and they have a great organization supporting them. In the mid lane, we have Faker. I do prefer Faker to Xiaohu or Cryan. Teddy is better than Betty, and Effort is probably about the same as Ming. It's tough to make a difference as a support that's like easily discernible. So T1, I'm a huge fan of T1. I think that they're probably in the tier 1 right now. So why do I think they're better than Invictus Gaming? If we do Kana against the Shy, I think Kana is more stable. I think the Shy definitely has chances to carry the match against Kana, but Kana is also playing a lot of carry champions right now. So it'll be interesting to see how he continues to develop. Ning against Cousin Elim, I think that's pretty close as well. Faker against Rookie. They're obviously both very good players. It's tough to make a difference between those two, but the bot lane is really where there's a gigantic difference. I think Teddy and Effort are much better than Puff and Southwind. That's not even close. Next up, we have Gen G. Gen G is a team that is good at beating bad teams, but they have a tough time against good competition, which is concerning. So Rascal, not really a difference maker in my opinion, especially against LPL top laners. Clid is a good jungler, but he hasn't really put the team on his back. It's normally up to BDD to win these games for his team. Ruler is a good player, and then the question mark at support, they don't really have a consistent roster they run out there, which is concerning. But I think Gen G is definitely at least in the tier 3 in China. So I think I do prefer Gen G over Sunning, EDG, and RNG, but that could all change. That could all change depending on what happens with the rosters of these teams. I think a lot of it's going to come down to form, but the talent would not keep Gen G out of China. Next up, we have Team Dynamics. Team Dynamics has been a pretty huge overachiever so far this split. They lost to a Freak of Freaks, which I expected. They beat Hanwha Life, which was a little bit surprising to me. They beat KT Rolster, which was a little bit surprising to me. And they beat Seolhaewon Prince. So after they beat Hanwha Life and KT Rolster, I was less surprised by the Seolhaewon Prince matchup, because when you have somebody like Mickey as your mid laner, it can go sideways. So Team Dynamics, they have Rich, Beyond, Kuzan, Deokdam, and Guger. Beyond, Kuzan, and Guger are not difference makers, especially if we compare them to the teams in China. So let's say Team Dynamics against EDG instead of RNG. Rich against Audi, probably 50-50. We don't have enough tape on Rich to know how good he is, or Audi for that matter. So it's kind of a question mark. Rich is more of a carry player. I'd probably actually give the edge to Rich, but just very slightly. Beyond against Junjia and Jai Jai. I think the fact that these are subs in EDG, I'm going to make it go even. Junjia and Jai Jai are probably better, but the fact that there are two of them does kind of muddy the water. I don't like that for any team. Kuzan against Scout. Scout is certainly a better player. Hope against Deokdam. I think Deokdam could theoretically be better than Hope, but Hope has a better body of work and has been able to play in the top professional leagues for a pretty long time at this point. So I would definitely give the edge in the bot lane to Team Dynamics, or to EDG. So I honestly don't think that Team Dynamics would be in one of the top 4 tiers, but I do think that they could compete at the bottom of the LPL right now, which really isn't saying much, because I think a Freak of Freaks could also compete with those teams. Like if it was a merit-based league, like I was saying, we would have something like we would have a Freak of Freaks and Team Dynamics replacing some of these teams down here, which would be a very interesting idea if Korea and China kind of came together and made one larger league, but I'm not sure how reasonable that is to put together. Next up, we have Damwon Gaming. Damwon Gaming is very good right now. I love watching Damwon Gaming's games because they have Showmaker, so that's a lot of fun to watch. So like I was saying, Damwon Gaming, we have Noguri, Canyon, Showmaker, Ghost, and Beryl. I think that For Damwon Gaming, it's another team that we should be looking to compare with at least the tier 3. I think that Damwon Gaming is better than Gen G, even though Gen G just beat them. I think in terms of upside, Damwon Gaming has higher upside. But I think I could be wrong about that. I'm not positive about Damwon Gaming being better than Gen G. So let's just consider Damwon Gaming against a team like V5. Damwon Gaming, Nagri I think is better than BuBu. Canyon is at least equal to Weiwei, probably better. Showmaker is better than Mole, and Ghost and Beryl are very different from SamD and PP God, but I think they're better. The fact that they have this like Senna Pantheon bot lane, which is kind of countering the meta in many ways, I think that Damwon Gaming would be able to create a large lead through the mid lane, have a supportive bot lane that goes even at least, and then takes over the game as time goes on. So definitely a tier 3 team. I think that Damwon Gaming has the upward mobility to get into the tier 2, and so does a team like IG or JDG. So I think that's really where things would change. Last up, we have DRX. DRX has gone undefeated so far. They beat a Freak of Freaks, which is a pretty okay win. They beat Gen G, which is a good win. They beat Sandbox, which everyone beats Sandbox, and they beat T1, which is another great win. So DRX right now, with Doran, Pyosik, Chovy, Deft, and Keria, I think you have to put them in the top 4 teams in the world. It's only fair, especially if T1 is up there. So I do think that this is pretty accurate. It's tough to distinguish between these 4 teams. I think they're easily the 4 favorites to win Worlds right now, and I would be surprised if one of them did not end up winning Worlds. So it's pretty stupid, but we have to do it. LCS and LCK. So let's start with the LEC. Which teams from the LEC could actually compete in China? Schalke, no way. XL, no, you can't play with us. Vitality, hell no. Fnatic, they probably can. Fnatic would probably be a tier 4 team in China, or they'd be a top end of this 5th tier. SK Gaming, no way. I think it's a fluke. Origin, no way. They play this boring macro game that isn't going to work against a lot of Chinese teams over the long run. Misfits Gaming, they're very interesting. I think Origin could probably be down here, but I think they'd be below a lot of these teams. Same thing with Misfits. I think Misfits, if they wanted to compete against these other teams down here, go ahead. I think they're an interesting blend right now of talent, but I don't really trust it. G2 is a team that I'm still very high on. I think that they probably belong in this 2nd tier of teams. If I was doing it based off of how I genuinely feel, I would say Damwon Gaming is probably above them. Move this down. Move Invictus Gaming up. So this is more accurate to how I feel. I think JDG against G2 is probably JDG favored. But for this, we're going to leave it as is. Rogue, you can't play in China. There's no way. They're 5-2. You're beating European teams. I don't care if you beat European teams. At best, you would be competing against like Team Dynamics and a Freak of Freaks. You're not as good as Fnatic. I don't care if you beat Fnatic. There's no way I can justify putting them up that high. And then Mad Lions. Mad Lions would probably be not allowed to play in China either. But because of how well they've been playing, I'll throw them down here. Rogue, you'll get a pity inclusion down here. LCS. What a joke. Dignitas, hell no. Immortals, hell no. 100 Thieves, Golden Guardians, hell no and hell no. TSM, no. Team Liquid, no. FlyQuest, hell no. Evil Geniuses. Evil Geniuses, I think, is just as good as these other teams that are down in this range. That needs to be proven by some strong performances moving on in the split, but that's about it. CLG, hell no. 4-2, I don't care. There's no way. C9, I'm going to give C9 the benefit of the doubt and put them into tier 4 in China, just to have a North American representative. I think it's unlikely that they actually end up competing with these kinds of teams, but they're close enough to Fnatic where I think that their inclusion isn't out of control. And then everyone knows that this isn't a real power rankings list without the second best team from the Americas, Santos Esports. Santos Esports is extremely exciting. I don't think that I can justify putting them in tier 4, but I think if you had Santos play against Team Dynamics of any of these teams in the You're Lucky You're from China tier, I could definitely see Santos taking games off of these teams. Their playstyle is extremely entertaining to watch, and I think that the talent is there. So it's really going to come down to, will they have the opportunity to show their talents on the world stage? I hope they do. If they don't make Worlds, I'd be shocked. And that's what I'm very excited for. So either they would make the play-in stage or the group stage. I'm not sure how Worlds is going to work this year, but I'm very enthusiastic about Santos. I love their roster. Jackpot and Rainbow, very good players. They might have some issues with like the metas that are upcoming, but if they can continue to play that counter meta playstyle where they're really focused on their solo lanes, I'd be very excited to see how they compete on the world stage. So let's go back through this. I think that tier 4, you really have a bunch of teams that are competitive, like genuinely competitive with the rest of the teams in the league. In this one, I would say that it's playoff teams, like you would expect them to be in the playoffs and above the teams that are below them, just based on recent form and everything like that. Now is kind of where we get into questionable territory. So then these are the teams that I would think have chances to make it to the finals in a league that included all of these teams. The G2 and Damwon Gaming are question marks. Maybe they do belong more in the playoff contender, and maybe Invictus Gaming as well, because I do think there's a pretty big tier. So I'm going to call them championship hopefuls. I think G2, it's tough with their recent form right now, but you have to remember, every time they show up to Worlds, they seem to level up and really give these teams from Korea and China some pretty great games. So I feel comfortable leaving it like this. I think that G2's playstyle is also favorable to a lot of the teams that are on this list, so I'm fine putting them up there. It is going to be more of like a long-term talent kind of thing instead of a recent form. But like I said, I believe in talent, and I think that G2 is a talented team. In tier 1, we have the favorites. This is the world class tier. These 4 teams are the best 4 teams in the world right now. I think it's indisputable at this point, unless you're ESPN Esports. So Top Esports and FPX, I think any given day, one team could beat the other. Same thing with T1 and DRX. And then when you're facing them off against one another, the Chinese teams are assumed to have a slight advantage, but I think when you get to the level of T1 and DRX, you really have the masters of 2 different playstyles playing against one another, and again, it would come down to whoever's better on the day. I think that it's tough to distinguish between the two. At best, you're getting 55-45 odds. Anything outside of that would be a bet. So that's it for my rankings. Thank you very much for watching. Let me know what you think about the teams that I included in the You're Lucky from China tier, because I think that those would be some fun matches to watch, but they're really they're not on the same level as the teams above them. So like I said, let me know if you disagree with any of my rankings. If you love my rankings, send them to ESPN Esports. Tag them in a tweet, because they need to understand that there are actually people out there who can give a ranking that's not a bunch of garbage and has some kind of internal consistency. I can't do the blurbs right now because I have to run. I have to make another video. But thanks again for watching. If you want to support the channel, check out Patreon. But until tomorrow, have a good one.